In the year 1806, Beethoven's 35 years old, and that year he published three.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Board of Adjustments meeting for Wednesday, December 17th. With that, let's look at our minutes from October 1st. They were short and sweet, super short. Any comments on them?
Oh, no, since we just met to approve relevant criteria from the previous meeting, and we took care of the previous minutes at that meeting, that it was a 10-minute meeting or less, and so I move approval of the minutes as presented.
We have a motion. We have a second. Actually, I will second that since the other two board members were not there. So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 2 abstentions. I believe the motion still passes.
They look good, though.
All right, on to our public hearing. And with that, there's too many switches on the wall. There we go.
All right. Good evening, board members. Before you tonight, for your review, we have a conditional use permit application for a parcel at 645 West Pullman Road. The applicant is proposing to utilize an existing 3-story building for a multifamily residential use at 645 West Pullman Road, which will include residential use on the ground floor and not located behind a commercial use. The subject property is located between Line Street, between Line Street and 3rd Street on the West Pullman Road, highlighted here in red, and the subject property we will be talking about does contain 2 parcels that are adjacent to each other and under common ownership. Here is a look at the existing building, the east end, and a look at the west end of the building. Give a little bit of background. The building has historically been utilized as a hotel, and its current use is a hotel. It also served as a multifamily residential use for graduate student housing, which included some general office space when the property was owned by the University of Idaho. And the applicant's proposal intends to utilize the existing 85 hotel rooms and convert those into 1-bedroom apartments, and a portion of those would then be located on the ground floor and would not be behind a commercial use. Additionally, the remaining space of the building is proposed to be used as office space with some storage space, 10,000 square feet for offices and 7,000 square feet of storage. The applicant proposes to install a new parking lot behind the existing building in order to satisfy the off-street parking requirement. There are 105 spaces existing on the lot, and there are 132 spaces required, and that is combining the all of the proposed uses, the residential and the office use. And the applicant has proposed providing 133 spaces as shown on the proposed site plan. And finally, the applicant proposes some minor modifications to a portion of the northern parking lot to provide landscaping adjacent to the public right-of-way. Here's the site plan that was submitted by the applicant. These parking lots here are all existing. These narrow rectangles are the portion of the building that will be utilized for the multifamily residential use, and this portion of the building will be the offices and storage space. The shaded parking lot back here is the proposed new parking lot. The subject property is located within the motor business zone. According to the zoning code, the motor business zone is intended to provide for the location and grouping of compatible uses having similar operation as they involve enterprises which depend primarily on the transient motor vehicle-based trade. And according to Ordinance 2014-19, which was just adopted on November 17th of this year, Residential uses that are located on the ground floor but not behind a commercial use are permitted in the motor business zone with a conditional use permit. The subject property, as I mentioned, is within the motor business zone here. The properties adjacent to the north, to the northwest, and to the southeast are also within motor business and contain uses, primarily retail use, with some eating and drinking establishments, and then a self-service storage use to the south. Nearby properties to the northeast and directly south and a little bit to the west are within the multifamily residential R4 district. The uses in this area within R4 contain single-family, two-family, and multifamily uses. The uses within the R4 zone to the south contain the Gormley Park and West Park Elementary School. And then finally to the southwest, we have the University Zone, which contains the Student Recreation Center and a university parking lot. The subject property is approximately a 2.85 acre parcel that's located again between Line Street and 3rd Street and has approximately 1,000 linear feet of frontage along the West Pullman Road. The subject property has 4 vehicle access points, one off of the 3rd Street frontage, 2 along West Pullman Road, and then 1 unimproved gravel access to the rear of the property along Line Street. There's an 8-foot sidewalk along the entire Pullman Road frontage. And the West Pullman Road is approximately 63 feet wide. It's a principal arterial with curb, gutter, and sidewalks on both sides. 3rd Street, where it is adjacent to this parcel, is approximately 26 feet wide with curbing, a partial sidewalk on the north side, and a sidewalk on the south side. And the proposed new parking area would be accessed via Line Street, where the street is 40 feet wide with curbing on both sides and a sidewalk on the west side only. As part of our standard review process for conditional use permits, we send the application out to various city departments and then as well as external agencies. So we had a comment from Idaho Transportation Department regarding access to the property and some limitations that they might have on landscaping adjacent to the right-of-way. The city intends to work with ITD to evaluate and monitor the existing approaches and then complete any necessary mitigation efforts. And that would be done during our standard permit review process if this conditional use permit is approved tonight. And then also any proposed landscaping would need to meet ITD's clear zone requirements, and again, that would all be reviewed during the standard permit process. Staff's recommendation tonight is to conduct a public hearing and consider all testimony presented as well as the relevant criteria and standards for a conditional use permit. Staff recommends approval of the application for a conditional use permit to allow residential use on the ground floor and not located behind a commercial use within the existing building at 645 West Pullman Road. And we do have one condition, that the applicant permanently reserve the minimum required functional open space for the proposed multifamily residential use, keeping the area free from structures, streets, roadways, and parking areas, and maintain the space for recreational or social use by the residents of the development. And with that, I'm available for questions.
I have one. Can you explain the one criteria?
Sure.
That was my question.
What its intent is?
Sure. So within most of our zoning districts, there's a minimum open space requirement, and specifically for residential uses, it's 75 square feet per unit. So with this use being changed from a commercial hotel use where there was, well, just to go back for a minute, so residential uses have the 75 square feet per unit, but other uses have a minimum of 400 square feet for the entire lot. So with this changing from a commercial use to a residential use, although the open space requirement would be reviewed again at the time of the permitting process, we did feel it was important to maybe tack that on as a condition to the conditional use permit so that the applicant ensures that he'll maintain the space for recreational use for the residents. And you're
presuming that it'll be the area to the south side of the building?
Presumably, yeah. That's essentially where that amount of required space is located. So.
Okay.
Just a follow-up to that then. So you're criteria, or your condition doesn't require it to be one area, just
No.
400 square feet.
Well, it's 75 square feet per unit for the residential use.
But could,
So-
with the wording of this, should we, am I to assume that you're suggesting one 400 square foot open space area, or that it's open to interpretation of two areas of 200 square feet, or some other configuration?
Well, it actually comes out to be quite a bit more than 400 square feet for the minimum requirement if you do the 75 times the 85
Right.
units. So I'm just suggesting that it be ensured that the required space be maintained for functional use by the residents.
Okay, and I understand that, and I'm just trying to see if if the wording of this would allow for that square footage requirement to be met in more than one way.
Yes, yeah, I'm, didn't intend to say it needed to be in a certain location on the property. Just has to have the minimum square footage.
Okay?
Do we need to deal with any kind of street or sidewalk improvements to that new parking lot, or is that something that the plan review will do
Right, yep.
later beyond approval of a conditional use permit?
Yes, it'll be, at the time that they submit building permits, it would be reviewed by Public Works
And
and,
subject to whatever that it would require? Okay. Anybody else have questions for the city?
thank you.
All right. Would the applicant like to come up and describe what you're doing? And
Good evening. I think I've met most of you, but I'm Jim Westberg, and I've been working with Cody on some of the legal aspects of this. And the staff report and our application, I think, cover exactly what we're trying to do quite well. I don't mean for this to sound like I'm talking down to you, but I'm mainly here because this is probably your first event under this new ordinance change, and I had to read it 2 or 3 times and try to understand it, but I just wanted to reiterate that the conditional use permit really only affects the first floor. Under the current ordinance, it's got to have retail in front of residential. The conditional use permit would allow residential only, and that's what Cody's asking for. And other than that, Scott and I are here to answer your questions, and Cody was going to introduce himself and talk about a couple things, and that's all I had, unless you have questions of me.
any questions?
Get rid of the lawyer. Thanks.
I like lawyers. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, most of them, I should say.
that.
I like you.
I'm Cody Merrill. I'm the one that applied for this. I'm sorry you guys away for the night.
Cody, we need you actually,
I need to, I was giving handed to
that's fine, but I'll need you to state your name and address at the mic so that they have it on record for us.
Here's just kind of a brief narrative that I put together, just so you guys could get a feel for what it was we're up to. And I've also got a portfolio that includes some of our prior projects that can, you guys can pass around and just look at. So I'm Cody Merrill, and I'm here to answer any questions you guys might have about the proposed Brookwood project. I would say Rebecca did a pretty good job of kind of summing up what it is we're trying to do here. Essentially, what I want to do is just take the building that's existing and turn it into a much, much better looking building. I think there's better uses for it. I think the renovations that we're going to do is really going to, I think it's going to be an asset to the community, to the university, and it's just a really good project all in all. So if I could define Merrill Enterprises by one word, or myself, it's quality. We're all about quality. I don't think there's a lot of quality apartments in Moscow, not nearly as many as what there should be, And that's kind of what, if you look through our portfolio, you'll see some of our prior projects and properties, and that's kind of what we're shooting for here, is to just take it. I think that it's a great project for all the parties involved. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And
So I've got one. Actually, go ahead. I'll word mine together. Go ahead, Evan. Ask me what you wanted to do.
Well, the big question is, what prevents you from operating this venture, making it succeed with the street front first floor property being used as code would generally require?
can you reword a little bit?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what you're asking exactly.
What would prevent you from operating this or making this venture succeed if we were to require, as the ordinance used to, that the first floor street front aspects of the property be used for retail or small office and things like that?
Okay,
Why?
I
So
understand.
why do these? And my second part of that is, how many apartments or square footage are we talking about as compared to the whole that are actually affected by this decision?
So there would be 28 units on the ground floor level, and it's, in all honesty, the project's not feasible without them. They're not set up for offices, they're not set up for retail, they're only 300 square feet, and it's just, it doesn't mash well together. We will have 10,000 square feet of Type B office space in Building A, but in order for the project to be feasible from my standpoint, we have to have the ground level, and we just can't do it without. So from the project, we're getting a lot of good things. I'm trying to go the extra mile and put in a lot of landscaping. We're going to do remove some of the asphalt, makes a lot of compact spots, as you can see from the site plan, right along the main corridor to really dress up the curb appeal. And that's kind of what I want it to be a win-win for everyone here. We're going to put a lot of money into residing the entire building, into removing all the cedar shakes and putting in asphalt. And we're going with luxury asphalt shingles. We just really want it to be an attractive building facility sitting on the main corridor. I think it makes sense. It's one of the entrances to the U of I. It sits on the main drag, and it's suffering from a lot of deferred maintenance. It is. And so I have to have the ground floor in order for the project to move forward.
And each of those 28 units is around 300 square feet?
They average about 320 square feet.
Okay.
My question was similar. So it looks like you're basically maintaining the internal floor plan the same. So the first floor on the front, on the two buildings closest to the west, are going to remain as a residential type of use, or apartment use, and the building on the east side, that will be completely office space?
It will be. That's when the university owned it, it was office space. We're just going to leave the entire building as Type B office space. There will be some storage just for private storage that's in there, but it will be all office.
Any other questions?
Okay.
None? Would anybody else care to come up and talk? You're the last man? You sure? We have a big audience. Let everybody have a chance to say something.
I'm Scott Becker with Hodge & Associates at 405 South Washington, and I'm the civil engineer on the project. So basically, if you have any questions, I think Becky did such a great job. There shouldn't be too many questions, but we can certainly answer them if you've got them.
Any questions for
Well, just throwing out, you made the trouble of
thank you.
marching up there, so I'll dream up a question for you. As I understand it, in your plans, your preliminaries, you are going to retain that access egress off of 3rd Street, so there's...
That's correct.
Yeah, because that's probably an important part of traffic flow there.
That's correct.
Yeah, all right.
I actually have a civil question for you.
Great.
The parking on the back side of the building shown there is a good idea. From a professional standpoint, from your professional standpoint, do you foresee any issue with a curb cut that close to that intersection going forward?
I do not. We've actually discussed that with the city, and they would prefer traffic going, using that back lot rather than off of 3rd Street, or off, Highway 8. So it is a little bit close, but it's not something that's going to cause a lot of traffic backup or potential for accidents.
Okay. I just didn't know how far down the rabbit hole you had gotten yet.
Yeah, we have looked at that issue also.
Okay. Any more questions? Seeing none,
Thank you.
we're squared. Seeing nobody else in the audience, I guess we'll close the public hearing and let the board deliberate. Comments? Anybody want to go first?
Well, as a conditional use permit, it's permitted. My general position on those conditional uses is if they meet the applicable standards, I don't see why we would stand in the way. And my review of it is it appears to meet the criteria. I think the condition that has been recommended by the staff is reasonable under the circumstances, and I don't have any problem with this.
Okay. I have a comment that kind of addresses your question with regards to how the uses are, and actually keeping all the office use on what appears to basically be the east end and keeping the residential on the other, from left to right, from a safety standpoint, is the better way to keep like fire separation and occupancy types rather than having them above and below each other. So for that reason, I think it's actually a good thing to allow the conditional use rather than to, potentially force them to have to put office on the ground level and put some of the other residential, displace it over into where they're planning to have the office from a health safety standpoint, in my opinion.
And fire separation.
Yeah, just in being able to make that building work well.
I can let Mark think a little bit and go ahead if you
Yeah,
want.
actually, it seems like a pretty simple solution to a problem that's sitting there unoccupied and taking care of its maintenance, and I like the idea of using small square footage single bedroom apartments that will be probably fairly inexpensive to rent, and it's a good location. It's near the university for foot traffic and bicycle traffic, and it has my approval.
And this property is perhaps, and it's gone through some changes, is maybe poorly zoned as motor business. I mean, you're always going to have access and egress complications, especially when traffic is bad during parts of the day, and that may have affected its underutilization in the past. A thing we have to consider always also is if we're giving away motor business property, and especially established buildings, that we're not creating a need in the community by doing that. We don't have a report about that, but my understanding of Moscow right now is that we're not suffering from any development snafus or downturn of retail activity because we're running out of motor business available properties, and that would certainly be a big consideration for us if we were. But as I started out with, I don't think it's a great motor business property, partly because of being on that curve, partly because of its isolation, and partly because, as the applicant pointed out, it has a past use and an established architecture for other purposes. So to turn it into motor business might be more complicated and expensive than anyone could envision doing, and I suspect, just guessing, that's probably prevented it from being developed fully in that regard in the past. So with all that, I'm in favor of it, and I'd make a motion then that we do accept the application as presented and with the recommendation as provided by staff for conditioning that retention of open space.
And I'll second that motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 It's a unanimous pass. Do we want to deal with conditions, or, we haven't really discussed them, so we can't really pass them on to the city yet to develop them.
Although
for us.
the city has done a nice job of proposing some relevant criteria and standards. Do you have any objection to using what the city has proposed?
No, and I looked over them, and I feel the same way you do. In this case, I don't see the need to re-meet and draw up something, or ask staff to draw up something, because I think they already have, So since we haven't entertained anything that would complicate the use of them, I would then further that with moving that we do accept the relevant criteria and standards as presented to us by the staff.
And I'll second
I have a
that.
motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 4. That's another unanimous pass.
And I have a question with that. Is it of any advantage to the record or to the staff that we read the relevant criteria and standards into the record?
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to need to do that. It's part of the minutes anyway with the staff report.
Okay. With that, gentlemen, you're good to go. At least to your next stage of the process. We do our best. This year. There's that. I'd like to keep one of these for the record.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Rebecca, do we have any board communications or other business
Nope, we don't. There's no other applications pending or being discussed.
pending? Okay. That deals with number 4. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I have a motion.
I second
I have
that.
a second.
It's an aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That's another unanimous
Merry Christmas.
pass. There we go.